Hi again. This is the second part of the series of videos showing how to do a t-test with Microsoft Excel. Okay, so we left off here. We already obtained a critical value for our test. That was step 6. We determined that the degrees of freedom were 45 and the critical T was 2.01. Now we're ready to obtain the p-value for our test. And we're going to do that with the Ttest function in Excel. Right? But before you use the Ttest function in Excel, you need to sort the values in the data by the grouping variable, in this case gender. Right? Then you'll be able to select the groups for your test. Right? In the function, Excel will ask you for an array, right, representing one of the groups in the test, the values of GPA for one of the groups for males, and then for the values for the other group, values of GPA for females. Then it will ask you how many tails are you using in your test, right? You can choose 1 or 2 depending on what your alternative is. Remember that in this case we're using a two-sided alternative, a non-directional, so we have to write 2 there. And then on the type, Excel will also ask you what type of test do you want me to perform. You can choose 1, 2, or 3, with 1 being a paired samples test, which we don't have in this example. Number 2, non-paired equal variances, which is the one we are assuming that we have. Or you could choose 3, non-paired unequal variances. Right? Well, then you can switch this and see if the results vary. Right? Go from 2 to 3 and see if the results vary significantly. In most cases, they will not. But we will use, in this case, a number 2. All right. So let's go to Excel, and I'm going to leave a space here for the p-value. And I'm going to have to go back to the data and perform the t-test there. So I'm going to write down the p-value here, and I'm going to put the function here. But notice first that the data is sorted by gender. Right? I already did this in the previous video. Right? I sorted the data using the data and sort tool. So now I can write the function. Okay, so Ttest, open parentheses, and Excel is already asking you for the things you need to include for this formula. So I'm going to get the GPAs for females first. Okay, I got them there, and then comma, that's done. Now Excel is asking me for the second group. So I'm going to get the GPAs for male students. And there you go. Whoops. Oops. I'm going to escape because I made a mistake there. It happens when you're using Excel. Okay, I'm going to select again females, then comma, and then the GPA for males. Make sure you don't let go of that button until it's all selected. Alright, now it's selected, then comma. I already have my groups in. Now, how many tails? 2. And what type of test? Comma. We're not using a type 1. A type 1 is a matched pair. Type 2 is non-paired, assuming equal variances, and we're going to assume that. So let's put a 2, close parentheses, and hit enter. Now we get this number, and it has an E on it. Right? That is Excel's way for using scientific notation. I don't know if you remember scientific notation, but this is a very small number, right? E to the minus 0.9 that means that you have a number that is 0 point, then 8 zeros, and then this 3. Right? So I'm going to copy this number here. I'm going to copy this number. We're using here, and I'm going to paste special. I'm just going to put the value here. The value. That is a very small number, right? So we used the Ttest function, and we got a very, very small number, right? This number is 0 point, then 8 zeros, and then this number. All right. Once we have our p-value, we're almost done. Our test, but we're going to go ahead and calculate the how all these things fit together. Once we have the p-value, we obtain the T statistic for the test using the p-value that we obtained in the last step, right? And we're going to use this function that it's already familiar to you. And we're going to include the probability that we got in the last test, the p-value, and the degrees of freedom. That is to get the T statistic for our test. Okay, so T value, we use the T inverse. The probability is this p-value that we got, and the degrees of freedom are the same, 45. All right. So now we have everything we need. Right? We have the critical T, 2.01, and the T value for our test, 7.34, and we have the p-value. It's a very small number. Right? Okay, with that we can make our conclusion. We can interpret the results and make our conclusions. All right, let's interpret these results. If your p-value is smaller than the significance level, lower than 0.05, you can reject the null hypothesis. Well, let's see what's happening. Our significance level is 0.05, and our p-value is 0.000000031, right? It's a lot lower than our significance level. So if your p-value is smaller, then you can reject the null. All right. Also, if your T statistic is large, if your critical value, if your T value is larger than your critical value, then you can reject. In this case, the T value for our test is 7.34 and the critical value is 2.01. So we can reject, right? We can reject the null that the average GPA for male students and female students are equal in the population. And if we can reject the null, then we can accept the alternative, right? That the average GPA for male students is not equal to the average GPA for female students in the population. It is not. That we can conclude that this difference that we are observing in the sample is also taking place in the population. We don't know exactly how large the actual difference is, but there is a difference in the population. Right? And now to write our conclusions, we'll use all these numbers. That's the last step. We would say the average GPA for female respondents in the survey, this was their mean, and that was the standard deviation, was higher than the average score, than the average GPA for male respondents. This was the mean for them and the standard deviation, right, in the sample. A t-test assuming equal variances revealed this difference to be statistically significant. And now notice that what I'm putting in this parenthesis. I'm putting the degrees of freedom for the test, right? T for 45, and it gave me a 7.35. That's the T statistic for my test. And here I'm saying that the p-value for this T statistic given given the degrees of freedom was lower than 0.05. It was lower than my significance level. So now the reader can know that, okay, in the sample you have the female respondents had a lot higher GPA than male respondents, and that gave me these results. I can conclude that that difference is also taking place in the population. And that is how you would conduct t-test in Excel. The main functions that I used, again, t-test function, but to do that I first sorted the data in terms of that grouping variable. When you get practice with this, you can do everything just with that function, right? You don't need to go through all the other steps. But for the purpose of this course, we want you to do those steps. All right, so that's it. Good luck in the lab.